She hadn't eaten in 2 days. One can of soup left in the cabinet. That was it. And then, a knock at the door. An old man shaking. Empty, tired eyes. Shaking hands. She looked at him. She looked at that soup. And she made a choice. And what the old man revealed standing right there in her door entrance would change everything she thought she knew about kindness, about sacrifice, and about the quiet miracles that find the people who deserve them most. But before I tell you what happened next, and trust me, you are going to want every single detail of this, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications. Because the stories we tell here are the ones that remind you why goodness still matters in this world. Don't miss a single one. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. Her name was Linda Mercer. And at 31 years old, she was already more tired than most people twice her age. Not the kind of tired that a vacation can fix. Tired in the bones. Tired in the soul. The kind of tired that comes from holding everything together for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to put anything down. Linda lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina. Southwest Side. A working neighborhood. The kind of street where people kept their yards clean and their curtains drawn, where everyone had enough pride not to show how little they had. She worked as a home health aide. Monday through Saturday, sometimes Sunday, depending on who needed her. She drove to other people's homes before sunrise and left after dark, helping elderly men and women bathe, dress, eat, and live with some dignity in the years when the body starts to betray the spirit. She did this work with care. Real care. The kind you can't fake, the kind her patients felt in her gentle hands and calm, steady voice. She made $14 an hour. Before Linda, there had been a different life planned. College in Raleigh. A nursing degree. A career that matched her intelligence, because Linda was sharp, the kind of sharp that her high school teachers called rare, the kind that could have taken her anywhere. But then her mother got sick. Heart failure, diagnosed when Linda was 22 and 3 semesters away from finishing her degree. She came home to help for what she thought would be a few months. That was 9 years ago. Her mother passed 4 years later, but by then, Linda had taken on her younger twin brothers, Charles and Daniel, who were 17 when their mother died and had no one else. She couldn't leave them. She wouldn't. So she stayed in Charlotte. Got her home health aide certification. Found the job. Kept the apartment. Raised 2 boys while she was mourning her mom and pushing her own dreams so far down that they didn't hurt as much anymore. Charles was 24 now and working at a logistics warehouse. Decent pay, inconsistent hours. Daniel was 24 and studying graphic design at community college part-time while working shifts at a grocery store. They both tried. They both contributed what they could. But the apartment was Linda's. The bills were mostly Linda's. The weight was mostly Linda's. She never complained about it. That's the important thing to understand about Linda Mercer. She was not the kind of woman who performed suffering for sympathy. She simply did what needed to be done and moved forward. If you asked her how she was, she would say, getting through it, with a small smile, and she meant it. Getting through it. Every single day. Her best friend Susan had known her since the 7th grade. They talked on the phone every Sunday evening, the only standing appointment in Linda's life that had nothing to do with someone else's need. Linda, Susan said one Sunday, you have to start thinking about yourself sometime. You can't pour from an empty cup, you know. I know, Linda said. Do you? Silence. Susan. I'm fine. You said that last week. Because it was true last week. But it was getting harder to say and mean at the same time. The truth was, things had gotten tight in a way they hadn't been in years. Daniel's car had broken down in October, which meant Linda was driving him to school 3 mornings a week before her own shift started. The extra gas cost her more than she'd budgeted. Then the building's water heater failed in November and the landlord took 3 weeks to fix it. Linda had covered the cost of a portable electric shower for the apartment, $48 she didn't plan to spend. By mid-November, she had just enough money in her bank account to pay the rent, which was due in 2 weeks, and almost nothing else. One evening she opened the refrigerator and did the math. 2 eggs. Half a container of leftover rice. A heel of bread. Some butter that had probably seen better days. And in the cabinet, 1 can of chicken and vegetable soup. A can of soup that she had been eyeing for 2 days, saving for the moment she truly needed it. That moment, she had decided, had not yet arrived. She made the eggs for dinner that night. Scrambled them with the bread and a little butter. She told herself it was fine. She told herself she wasn't hungry. She was very hungry. The next morning was a Thursday. November. Charlotte in November carries a chill that comes up from the ground as much as it falls from the sky. Linda had an early shift. She was already in her scrubs and her coat when she opened the front door and nearly stepped on him. He was sitting on the small concrete step just outside her apartment door. First floor, end of the hall. She had never seen him before in her life. An old man, white hair, small build, wearing a gray coat that was clean but too thin for the cold. He had a canvas bag by his feet, the kind you take to a farmer's market. He was sitting very still, his hands folded in his lap, his head bowed forward like a man in prayer, or a man he had no options left and felt like standing there was all he could do. He looked up when he heard the door open. His eyes were blue and clear, the kind of clear look some people get as they age, not because they're empty, but from having seen and survived so much that what remains is almost pure. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, his voice quiet and calm. He moved to stand, slowly, with the careful effort of a man whose joints were stiff and achy. "I didn't mean to scare you. I sat down to rest and I'm afraid I may have nodded off. I was looking for apartment 1C. Linda blinked. "This is 1F. Ah." He let out a breath. "I must have gone the wrong direction from the elevator." He made a small, shy move, like he was putting himself down. "Not the first time this week." Linda looked at him. She looked at the canvas bag. She looked at his hands, which were trembling slightly, whether from cold or age or both, she couldn't tell. "Are you all right?" she asked. He smiled. It was a good smile. Patient and warm. "Perfectly all right, thank you. Just old." He said it without self-pity. Just as a fact, the way someone might say it might rain. 1C is the other direction, Linda said. "Past the elevator, take a left." "Thank you." He began gathering himself, slowly, reaching for his bag. She should have walked to her car. She was already 7 minutes behind schedule and Mrs. Patterson, her first patient, needed her medication at 7:30 sharp. But something made her stop. "Have you eaten?" she asked. She didn't know why she asked it. It came out before she had thought about it. He paused. Looked at her. Something crossed his face that he quickly rearranged. "I'm fine," he said. It was the exact same tone she used with Susan. And she recognized it immediately. "I have soup," Linda said. "It'll take 4 minutes on the stove." "I couldn't possibly. It's just soup." She held the door open. "Come in." His name was Thomas. Thomas Hargrove. 81 years old. He had moved into the building 2 weeks ago to be closer to his cardiologist, he explained, and to a woman named Elizabeth, his daughter, who lived in the neighborhood and had insisted he not be alone through his upcoming procedure. He sat at Linda's small kitchen table with the careful he stood like a man who used to run the room. But his hands, folded on the table, told a different story. A humbler one. Linda heated the soup. The last can. She didn't think twice about it. She poured it all into a bowl and placed it in front of him with a glass of water and the remaining loaf of bread, buttered. He looked at the bowl. Then he looked up at her. "This is your breakfast," he said. It wasn't a question. "Soup's not really a breakfast food," she said lightly. "I'll grab something on the way." She wouldn't grab anything on the way. She had $2.25 in her wallet and she only had a few dollars left. But she smiled, and she meant the smile, because there was something about watching him wrap both hands around that bowl, the warmth of it, the relief of it, that made her feel full in a different way. "You're very kind," Thomas said softly. "It's just soup," she said again. He looked at her steadily. "No," he said quietly. "It isn't." She grabbed her bag, told him to pull the door shut when he left, and walked out into the November cold. She thought about him on the drive to Mrs. Patterson's house. She thought about those clear blue eyes and the way he'd said "I'm fine," the universal language of someone who was not, in fact, fine. She thought about his overcoat, thin for the weather. She thought about the canvas bag, light and mostly empty. She pushed the thoughts aside. She had work to do. But that afternoon, when her last shift ended and she sat in the parking lot of the second patient's home, eating a pack of crackers she'd found in her the little box in the car dashboard and calling it lunch, her phone rang. Unknown number. Charlotte area code. She answered. "Is this Linda Mercer?" The voice was professional. Female. Careful. "Yes? Ms. Mercer, my name is Jessica Crawford. I'm the personal assistant to Thomas Hargrove. I'm calling because Mr. Hargrove asked me to reach out to you today. He said he met you this morning." Linda frowned. "He did. Is he all right?" "He's perfectly well, thank you." A brief pause. "Ms. Mercer, Mr. Hargrove would like to invite you to dinner this weekend. He said he owes you a meal." Linda almost laughed. "Tell him he doesn't owe me anything." It was soup. Another pause. Longer this time. "Ms. Mercer." The assistant's voice shifted slightly, not warmer, exactly, but more deliberate. "Please accept the invitation." Something in the way she said it made Linda pause. "All right," Linda said slowly. "Where?" "Saturday evening. 7 o'clock. The address Jessica had given her was in the Myers Park neighborhood of Charlotte. Linda had driven through Myers Park exactly once in her life and spent the whole time looking out the window at the houses the way you look at paintings in a museum, appreciating them from a distance, understanding they were not for you. She almost didn't go. She sat in her car outside her apartment building for 10 minutes, wearing the nicest thing she owned, a dark blue dress she'd bought 3 years ago for her cousin's wedding and hadn't worn since, talking herself into and out of it twice. What kind of man has a personal assistant to call strangers about dinner? What kind of man lives in Myers Park and eats soup from a food bank? She drove anyway. Because something in her said go. And Linda Mercer had learned, through years of hard decisions, to listen to that voice. The address was a house. Not a big house by Myers Park standards, but beautiful. Brick, 2 stories, a garden along the front walk that someone clearly tended with love. Lights warm in the windows. A late-model car in the driveway she couldn't name but recognized as expensive. Jessica Crawford met her at the door, around 45 years old. Precise. Professional in a way that made Linda stand up. She stood up straighter without even realizing it. Mr. Hargrove is in the dining room, Jessica said, leading her through a hallway lined with photographs and quietly beautiful things. He's very much looking forward to this. Thomas was standing when she entered the dining room. No overcoat this time. A dark suit, simple and perfectly fitted. The thin gray overcoat, Linda now understood, had been a choice, not a limitation. He looked taller standing. More solid. Those same clear blue eyes, but in this context, something about them landed differently. Ms. Mercer, he said, extending his hand with a warmth that was entirely real. Thank you for coming. You said you owed me soup, she said. I hope this counts. He smiled. It's a start. The table was set simply. Nothing performative, nothing excessive. Good food. Good wine she barely touched because she was driving. They talked. And the conversation moved the way conversations do when two people are. They were really interested in each other. He asked about her work. Not the polite version of the question, not oh, how nice, that must be rewarding, but real questions. What was the hardest part? What did she wish people understood about the patients she cared for? Had she always wanted to do this work? She told him about nursing school. About her mother. About Charles and Daniel. She didn't mean to tell him as much as she did, but he had that quality, the quality of certain rare people who listen with their whole face, who make you feel that what you're saying matters enough to be heard completely. You gave up a great deal, he said when she finished. I didn't think of it that way at the time. How did you think of it? She considered. Like there was a thing that needed doing and I was the person who could do it. She paused. That's just what you do. Thomas was quiet for a moment. He looked at his water glass, then back at her. My late wife used to say something very similar, he said. She said that goodness isn't a feeling. It's a decision. Made quietly, usually when no one is watching, usually when it costs you something. He paused. She was the wisest person I ever knew. I've been looking for evidence of her thesis ever since she passed. Linda felt something shift in the room. Very quietly. Very certainly. Did you find any? She asked. He looked at her directly. Thursday morning, he said. Apartment 1F. Now. Before I go any further, I need you to understand something. Because this is the part of the story that people always rush past. The part that gets reduced to and then he turned out to be rich. But that's not the point. That has never been the point. The point is what Linda didn't know when she opened that soup can. She didn't know Thomas Hargrove was the founder and chairman of Hargrove Capital Partners, one of the most well-known investment companies in the Southeast. She didn't know that the thin gray overcoat was a habit from 30 years of deliberate humility, something his wife, Barbara, had taught him in the early days when the money first started coming. The moment you start performing wealth, Barbara used to say, is the moment you start losing yourself. She didn't know that Thomas had been doing this for years. Not as a test, exactly. More as a practice. He called it staying honest. Every few months he would go somewhere ordinary, a bus, a park bench, a building hallway, dressed like a man of moderate means, and he would pay attention to how the world treated him. Not to catch anyone out. Not for punishment or reward. Just to remember what the world actually looked like at ground level. To stay connected to the place he'd come from. He had grown up in Gastonia, North Carolina. The son of a factory worker and a school cafeteria cook. He remembered what a can of soup meant when you were out of other options. He remembered it in his body, the way you remember cold or hunger, not as history but as sense memory. He had given everything he had to build Hargrove Capital, from a 26-year-old's idea and a borrowed desk in a shared office space. The firm now managed over $4 billion in assets. His fingerprints were on office parks and hospitals and manufacturing facilities across 6 states. But you wouldn't know it. That was the point. You wouldn't know it by looking at him. And Linda hadn't known. She had seen an old man sitting cold and still in a hallway. She had seen hunger she recognized because she knew it herself. And she had responded the only way she knew how. She gave what she had. All of it. Without calculation. Dinner ended. Thomas walked her to the door himself, waving off Jessica. "I'd like to see you again," he said. "If you'd be willing." "I think I would be," Linda said. "I'll be in touch through proper channels this time." He smiled. "Maybe a phone call from an actual human being rather than my assistant." She laughed. "That would be a good start." She drove home with both hands on the wheel and the heater running and something warm and entirely unfamiliar sitting in her chest. He called Sunday morning. They talked for 2 hours. He called again Wednesday evening. And Thursday. By December, it had become a pattern: calls, then coffee at a quiet place in Plaza Midwood that he discovered and she already knew. Then longer conversations. Then an afternoon at the Botanical Gardens walking slowly because his knee was being difficult, and Linda walked slowly without remarking on it, which he noticed and appreciated more than she would ever know. He told her about Barbara. About losing her 3 years ago to a cancer that moved faster than anyone expected. About the silence that followed, the big house that felt empty and quiet, and the habit of setting out 2 cups in the morning before remembering he was alone. He told her about Elizabeth, his daughter, who worried about him constantly and expressed it in the form of planning. Calendars, appointments, check-ins, because she was a person who solved things by organizing them, which was something she had gotten entirely from him. "She's going to want to meet you," Thomas said one Thursday in January. "Should I be nervous?" Linda asked. "Only if you're afraid of very direct questions delivered with complete warmth." "So yes," Linda said. He laughed. It was a good laugh, whole and genuine, the kind that a person finds again after grief. Elizabeth Hargrove was 47. Sharp, warm, thorough. She met Linda for coffee in February without her father present, her idea, her terms, and she asked Linda everything. Not unkindly. But completely. What did Linda want? What were her plans for her brothers? What did she know about her father's life, his foundation, his work? Had any of it factored into her interest in him? Linda answered every question steadily. She talked about Charles and Daniel. She talked about wanting to finish her nursing degree someday, still, even now, even at 31, that it was a slow dream but not a dead one. She talked about her work, about Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Rodriguez and the others she cared for, about what it meant to be trusted with someone's most vulnerable hours. "What did you think when you found out who he was?" Elizabeth asked. Linda was quiet for a moment. "I thought about the soup," she said. "I thought about the fact that I didn't have anything else to give him and I gave it anyway. And I thought, if it had been the other way around, if I had known, would I have given it differently?" She paused. "I don't think so. I hope not." Elizabeth studied her. "He said you reminded him of my mother. He told me about her." "She would have liked you," Elizabeth said. "She didn't like very many people, which made it count for something." She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "Okay," she said simply. And that was that. March came. The dogwoods came up early in Charlotte that year, which people said meant something. Linda's community college sent her information about their nursing bridge program, a way for health aides to become nurses faster. She'd seen it before. She'd put it away before, this time Thomas saw it on her kitchen counter. "Tell me about this," he said. She told him. About the program. About what it would cost. About how it would require cutting back on work, which meant cutting back on income, which meant the apartment, the brothers, the whole careful structure she had built so that no piece of it could move without the others shifting. "What would it take?" he asked. "Thomas. I'm asking a practical question." She told him the number. Tuition, lost income, covered expenses for 18 months. He did not flinch. He wrote it down on a piece of paper with a pen from his coat pocket, old-fashioned and deliberate, the way he did everything. "This is not a gift," he said, when he looked up from the paper. "I know," she said. She did know. She had learned by then how he operated. "It's an investment in a nursing career that's already 22 years overdue," he said. "Pay me back in good work. Every patient gets the same care you gave Mrs. Patterson. That's the return I'm after." She looked at him for a long moment. "You know I'll hold you to that framing. I'm counting on it." She enrolled in April. And for Charles and Daniel, Thomas did what he always did when he saw someone with talent not getting help. He connected Charles with the operations director at one of Hargrove Capital's logistics companies, not a handout. He got an introduction, a conversation, and a real chance at a job that fit the kind of work he'd been growing into, even if he didn't have a name for it. Charles earned the job on his own. He thanked Thomas once, simply, and Thomas said, "Thank your sister. She built you." Daniel's graphic design work, he was really good at what he did. Thomas had seen his work papers on Linda's fridge. Printed pages from Daniel's program, pinned up with the quiet pride of someone who believed in something but had nowhere to put it yet. Thomas connected him with the marketing director of one of his real estate development firms. Small project, initial contract. Daniel delivered work that surprised everyone, including himself. He got 3 more contracts before the year was out. None of this was charity. Thomas Hargrove was meticulous about that. He understood, at 81, what charity does to a person's spirit versus what opportunity does. He had been given exactly one opportunity in his life, a college scholarship from a fund he'd never been able to trace to its source, and it had changed everything. He had been trying to pay it forward ever since. But there is another piece of this story. And I don't want to skip it, because the world has a way of completing itself. Linda worked at the home health agency with a woman named Barbara, no relation to Thomas's Barbara, just a coincidence of names, a woman who had been her supervisor for 4 years. A woman who had, quietly and consistently, made Linda's life harder in ways that were difficult to name but impossible to miss. Barbara the supervisor had a particular way of looking at Linda's dedication and framing it as simplicity. "Linda's so good with the difficult cases," said at staff meetings in a tone that meant Linda doesn't complain because Linda doesn't know any better. She passed better resourced assignments to other aides. She overlooked Linda for the training opportunities that came with small pay increases attached. When Linda once raised a concern about a patient's care plan, Barbara had smiled and said, "That's very sweet, Linda. Leave the medical decisions to the medical staff." Linda had never said anything. She needed the job. In February, the same month Elizabeth Hargrove evaluated her over coffee, Linda's agency was acquired. Hargrove Capital had a healthcare services division. Thomas built the company to make home healthcare more professional in areas that didn't have good services. Barbara had complained in a staff meeting that outside investors didn't understand the field. When the company was bought, new managers came in. They started reviewing the staff again. The new director called Linda into her office in March. "Your patient satisfaction scores are consistently the highest in this office," the director said, looking at the records. "We want to promote you to senior patient advocate. It comes with a case management role, training responsibilities, and a 30% pay increase." Linda sat very still for a moment. "I want to be transparent," Linda said. "I'm starting a nursing bridge program in April. I may need schedule adjustments." "We know about the program," the director said. She didn't elaborate on how. "We'll accommodate it. We're trying to build staff who become something. That's the whole point." She accepted the position. Barbara was reassigned to a different office. Not fired. Just moved. Sometimes the correction is quieter than the sin, and it still counts. Here is the part of the story that the internet would have liked to turn into something viral and simple. The part where the old man ends up being rich and everyone learns a nice, simple lesson, like a clean little story, but life doesn't have clean edges. And this story doesn't either. What Thomas gave Linda wasn't a rescue. It was recognition. He saw what she had built, the quiet architecture of a life given in service to people who needed her, and he treated it with the dignity it had always deserved but rarely received. He saw Charles and Daniel not as burdens she carried but as people she had helped form, and he pointed them toward doors and said knock. What Linda gave Thomas was something no amount of capital could purchase. She gave him evidence that Barbara had been right, that goodness is a decision, made quietly, when it costs you something, when no one is watching. That the human instinct to care for a stranger is not naive. That it is, in fact, the most sophisticated and necessary thing we are capable of. He had been looking for proof of that for 3 years. And it found him in a hallway, on a cold November morning, in an apartment building on the southwest side of Charlotte. In a can of soup. Thomas proposed in September. A year minus 2 months from the morning he sat on her front step. He did it at the small table in Plaza Midwood, the same place they'd been having coffee since December. Same corner. Same plain wooden chairs. He had the ring in the breast pocket of his jacket, not a huge diamond, but a meaningful stone, a blue sapphire, the color of his eyes, the color Barbara had loved, a color that meant something to him and that he wanted to mean something going forward. He pushed it across the table. "You once gave me everything you had," he said. "A can of soup when you had nothing else. I've spent the past year trying to understand what kind of person does that. And I've come to the conclusion that the answer is simple." He looked at her steadily. "The kind of person I want to spend whatever years I have left sitting next to." Linda looked at the ring. Then at him. Then at the ring again. "Thomas," she said. "I know the math looks strange," he said. "I'm 81. You're 31. Elizabeth has already told me exactly what she thinks and has now he finally accepted it, but it took 3 talks to get there." Linda almost smiled. What did she say, the first time? That I had better make sure I was thinking about your future, not just mine. That if I loved you I would make sure you were protected and provided for completely regardless of what happened. She said it with complete warmth, he added, which made it considerably more unsettling. And then? And then she said she could see it. What you are to each other. She said she hadn't seen me like this since her mother was alive. He paused. She said her mother would have liked you. She said it again, which was more than she said it about anything. Linda was quiet for a moment, looking at the ring, at the sapphire, which caught the light in a way that seemed deliberate. I'm going to finish this nursing program, she said. Of course you are. And I'm going to keep working. I'm not going to stop. I would be disappointed if you did. And Charles and Daniel are my family. They stay my family. Linda. His voice was gentle and certain. That was never a question. She looked up at him. I love the fisherman's daughter, he said. Not whatever title comes after this. She laughed, sudden and whole, and the couple at the next table looked over, and neither of them cared. Yes, she said. Obviously yes. He put the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. Thomas Hargrove paid attention to every detail. They were married in November. Exactly 1 year and 5 days after she found him in the hallway. Small ceremony. The garden of the brick house in Myers Park where the dogwoods had long since finished, but the garden was still beautiful, because someone still took care of it with love. 40 people. Elizabeth, who cried, which she had not expected to do and which she handled with a straight spine and quiet dignity, exactly like her father. Charles, who gave a toast that started solemn and ended with a joke that only Linda understood, which was perfect. Daniel, who designed every piece of stationery and signage for the wedding, every card and program, with a precision and beauty that made 3 guests ask if he did this professionally and left with his card. Thomas's cardiologist was there, which Linda insisted on, which made Thomas laugh for 3 minutes. And from St. Louis, in the front row, Susan. On video call from Raleigh. I told you, she said immediately when Linda looked at the camera before the ceremony. I told you that you couldn't pour from an empty cup. She paused. I did not know the universe would send you someone to refill it. But I should have known, Linda. I really should have known. Here is what happened after. Linda finished her nursing bridge program the following June. Thomas was in the front row. Elizabeth beside him. Charles and Daniel in the second row, so loud at the graduation applause that the people around them laughed instead of being annoyed. She went to work as a registered nurse at a community health clinic 2 miles from the apartment where she had lived for 9 years. The apartment she kept. Because she was building equity in it now, systematically, the way her husband had taught her to think about long-term assets, and because that apartment, those rooms, that kitchen table, was where she had learned that she was exactly who she thought she was, on a morning when there was 1 can of soup and an old man in the hallway. Hargrove Capital, under Thomas and Elizabeth's direction, expanded its home health services division. Linda's input on patient advocacy and care standards became part of the operational framework. Her name is not on the building. She doesn't want it to be. But her principles are in the practice. Every day, in facilities across 6 states. Charles made regional operations supervisor within 2 years. He bought a house. He called Linda every Sunday morning now, because he wanted to, because he understood finally what she had given to build the life that made his life possible. Daniel's design firm, launched at 26 with 1 contract and a laptop, has grown to a 4-person studio. They do work for Hargrove portfolio companies and half a dozen Charlotte area businesses. His work is honest and beautiful, like the sister who made sure he could do it. And the lesson of this tale. My father used to say, the man who gives when he has nothing gives the most valuable thing there is. He gives proof that the world is better than it appears. Linda Mercer opened a can of soup on a cold November morning for an old man she had never seen before and would never have seen again. She did it because she recognized hunger. She did it because she was the kind of person who, when she saw a need she could meet, simply met it. Without performance. Without calculation. Without asking what was in it for her. That $23 can of soup, the last thing in her cabinet, the meal she was saving for herself, was worth more than every asset in the Hargrove Capital portfolio. Because it was given with a pure heart. The hand that gives is the hand that receives. Not always. Not on a schedule. Not in a way that you can plan for or count on. But sometimes, in a hallway, on an ordinary Thursday morning, in an ordinary building, on an ordinary street, the world completes itself. And when it does, it is extraordinary. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you of someone you know, or someone you want to be, subscribe. Turn on notifications. Hit that like button and leave a comment below telling me the last time someone's small kindness changed something for you. Because these stories matter. they always have. And we are not done telling them.